Hello everyone, this is lecture number 2 on Kannon-gyō, Wednesday lecture series of this season, Fall and Winter 2025-2026. By now I believe those of you who have signed up, so to speak, for this lecture series have received the text of Kannon-gyō. Michelle and I retouched the English translation in the way that makes a little better sense, in the way Dogen and all the way through to Sawakiroshi, and then we are going to explain. So I do also realize that maybe some of you have never actually read Kannon-gyō. So as you know, just like many other sutra, Lotus Sūtra is also written both prose portion and verse portion. This is a tradition carried all the way through from ancient Buddhism. And then Kannon-gyō, which is a chapter 25 of Lotus Sutra, is also incorporating the same so-called manierism by that time. So it starts with prose, and then in the middle of that, it changes into verse and repeats the same contents, but in the verse style, and then ends with the verse. This chapter 25 is kind of simple. Start with the prose and ends with the verse. In comparison to the other chapters or other texts, it comes and goes and mixed up. So what we did was we translated up to the end of prose portion. So I'd like to read it first, just in case, for the sake of building the arguments after this. Okay, so, and if you haven't received the text yet, please contact us at info@nyzc4dogenstudy.org. Now, I'm going to open the text on the shared screen. This text is, as usual, when I can, I try to do this as close as possible to the original, so that we can do comparison study, which is very important to read any Buddhist text. So this time I made it into original Chinese, as I am going to talk about this later a little more. It's a Kumarajiva's translation. There are 6 translations attempted by the Chinese, but currently we do have the remnants of the 4. And out of the 4, 2 became very influential. And out of the 2, 1 became really like a principal text, which is Kumarajiva's translation. And then I also put the Japanese phonetic sound because many of you do have to pronounce this in the Soto School of Japan's morning services. So I thought it would be kind of handy if you have this here. So, and then after that, I do understand many of you are quite advanced in Japanese study. So I put, currently this is a standardized Japanese translation of Lotus Sutra written in red. And then after that, there's an English translation. We intentionally did not translate those words such as mujinni or kanzeon because this is where the discrepancy of how to read starts to be born. So therefore, I like you to take these very important keywords just as it is, instead of trying to change the name into the meaning. It's almost like, to me, for instance, my full name is Hajime Issan Koyama Shinyu. I have 4 names here. so kind of European aristocratic. But anyway, so instead of calling me Hajime Issan Koyama Shinyu, if you have to translate that, sounds ridiculous, don't you think? Hajime is the beginning, unification, number one, and Issan is one mountain, and Koyama is a hill, right? And Shinyu is a true interpenetration, so to speak. So you don't call people that way, right? So I think one of the major mistakes in translation actually started to happen when they started to translate some sort of a word Buddhists created to deliver the new concept into contemporary English or contemporary foreign languages. For instance, in Japan, we didn't translate this word. We just took it as it is, as a new concept to learn. So we did it that way. So anyway, let me just read this up to some portion so that if you are somebody who has never really familiar with the Kannon-gyō, you vaguely at the beginning get the impression what they are talking about. At that time, the Mujinni Bodhisattva immediately rose from his seat. In parentheses, I vaguely put it could mean infinite, inexhaustible aspiration, but it is a symbolic way of talking about something else. So I'm going to explain this in detail later. Immediately rose from his seat, bared his right shoulder and folding his hands in gassho, turned towards the Buddha and spoke thus. I'm going to explain this later, of course, in the consequential lecture series, but each one of them has a specific meaning, such as rose up from his seat, turned toward, etc., etc., and then also immediately. These are, I thought, the words we can kind of translate, but original meaning doesn't particularly mean immediately. Doesn't particularly mean actually physically rose from. So it's very difficult to translate Buddhist text into any foreign languages. But anyway, we continue. Well-honored one. For what reason is Kanzeon Bodhisattva named Kanzeon? In the original Sanskrit text, it's the same thing. Well, you call this as Avalokiteshvara, but why it is called Avalokiteshvara? Because in original Sanskrit, Avalokiteshvara is also made-up word. So if someone who is in that contemporary time who can read, understand Sanskrit, still don't know what Avalokiteshvara means. So it's not a good idea to translate this into something you think what it is. So then, the Buddha answered to the Mujinni Bodhisattva, good son. Again, good son is also a translation, but also means something else, and I will explain later. So this is the reason why our commentary of the Buddhist text always has to go like word by word and phrase by phrase. But at this point, I just want you, some of you who have never been had an opportunity to read this sutra, just to have a line of the thoughts. A good son, if there are countless hundreds of thousands of myriads of quantities of living beings suffering from pain and distress, and they hear the name of Kanzeon Bodhisattva and single-mindedly call upon this name, Kanzeon Bodhisattva will instantly perceive these cries and all will be liberated. If maintaining the name of Kanzeon Bodhisattva, though falling into a great fire, the fire will not burn because of this Bodhisattva's great divine power. If floundering in deep water, call upon the name and the shallows will immediately be within reach. If hundreds of thousands of myriads of quantities of beings seeking gold, silver, lapis lazuli, moonstones, agate, coral, amber, pearls, and other treasures go out upon the ocean, and black gale blows their ships adrift to the land of the Rakshas, demons, and if among them there is even a single person who calls upon the name of Kanzeon Bodhisattva, all those people will be freed from the torments of Rakshasas. For this reason, the name is Kanzeon. If again there is one who, threatened with immediate harm, calls upon the name of Kanzeon Bodhisattva, the swords and clubs of adversaries will instantly crumble to pieces and freedom regained. Even if the 3,000 great thousand world, the entire universe, this is a Buddhist way of talking about the entire universe, so therefore we put that in parentheses, were full of Rakshasas, seeking to torment someone. These evil demons, hearing this person call upon the name of Kanzeon Bodhisattva, would not be able to see them with their evil eyes, much less harm them. Furthermore, whether guilty or not guilty, if one bound by manacles and chains calls upon the name of Kanzeon Bodhisattva, all fetters will immediately be severed and freedom at once regained. If the 3,000 great thousand world were full of outlaws and thieves, and there was a merchant chief leading a party of merchants tasked with conveying precious treasures along a precarious road, and among them one man spoke, saying, "Good sons, do not be afraid. Single-mindedly call upon the name of Kanzeon Bodhisattva, and the Bodhisattva will endow all beings with fearlessness. By calling upon the name, when encountering outlaws and thieves, liberation is attained." Hearing this, if all the merchants together chant Namu Kanzeon Bodhisattva, then by calling out the name, liberation is immediately gained. Mujinni Kanzeon Bodhisattva Mahasattva. Mujinni Kanzeon Bodhisattva Mahasattva, great divine power, mighty and immense, is like this. Let me go on a little more. If anyone beset by great carnal desire constantly keeps in mind and reveres Kanzeon Bodhisattva, release from desire is gained. If any beset by great anger constantly keeps in mind, reveres Kanzeon Bodhisattva, release from anger is gained. If any beset by great ignorance constantly keeps in mind and reveres Kanzeon Bodhisattva, release from ignorance is gained. Mujinni, such are the abundant benefits bestowed by divine power of Kanzeon Bodhisattva. Therefore, let all living beings constantly keep in mind. If any woman desires a son by bowing and making offerings to Kanzeon Bodhisattva, a meritorious, virtuous, and wise son will be born. If desiring a daughter marked by an exquisite demeanor, who plants virtuous roots and is beloved and respected by all, will be born. Mujinni, such is the power of Kanzeon Bodhisattva. If anyone reveres and respectfully bows to Kanzeon Bodhisattva, merits will not be rejected and swept away. Therefore, let all living beings receive and uphold the name of Kanzeon Bodhisattva. Mujinni, suppose a person receives and upholds the name of Bodhisattva as numerous as the sands of 62 courses of Ganges, and for as long as his body endures, makes them offerings of drink, food, garment, bedding, and medicaments. What do you think? Would good men and good women gain abundant merits or not? Mujinni replied, extremely abundant, well-honored one. And then Buddha says in comparison, the Buddha said, if anyone receives and upholds the name of Kanzeon Bodhisattva even for a moment, respectfully bowing and making offerings, the merits of the two will be exactly equal without a difference, and it cannot be exhausted in hundreds of thousands of myriads of vortices of kalpas. Mujinni, such is the immeasurable and boundless wealth of merit and virtue obtained by receiving and upholding the name of Kanzen Bodhisattva. The rest is a little long, so I'm going to stop here today. But now, for those of you who have never had a chance to read Kanzen, now you have a general idea. And also general idea number one, why this has been so misunderstood. And also, if you are somebody who's been studying Buddhism for a little while, you already catch, oh, this is the symbolic way, traditionally symbolic way of saying things. For instance, ever since ancient Buddhism, daughter, son is a symbolic way of talking about the prajna. And the daughter is a symbolic way of talking about the compassion. So it is not about asking for help to give a birth to a beautiful daughter or clever son. It is something to do with your practice, how you raise your prajna, how you raise your compassion. But then, at the beginning I was telling you about this, but the Lotus Sutra's typical characteristic known to everybody is that this sutra utilizes almost like a Greco-Roman style of methodology, talking about invisible concept into impersonification. So, for instance, this is like a typical Mahayana Sutra. Uchiyama Roshi often said, unless Buddhism went to the north and went to merge into the Silk Road nations, Mahayana Buddhism probably never really was born. And so it's a Western influence, so to speak. Like in Greco-Roman concept, there's something called beauty. But the beauty is not visible, but they have to create something visible. So therefore, they create Venus as a symbol of beauty. In some way or another, there's this kind of like a spiritual tradition from the West and spiritual tradition from India merges around this time in Gandhara and then start to use this impersonification method. So if you really know this, from the beginning of the sutra, it is a very good idea not to make too much about this I vis-a-vis you, and then try to translate it as close as possible to the original. Original text does not have a subject and object. So in another word, if you must translate into Western language, it is not possible to translate everything without I, subject and object. So that's why you start to see this as if I am in trouble and there's somebody who rescued me out there. And so that's a translation trick. So in this new translation, we tried very, very hard to stay as close as possible to the original that doesn't use subject and object. So therefore, what they are trying to say is much clearer than reading in English, so to speak, so-called. So that's the new translation, and Michelle and I keep working on the verse portion, and most possibly by that time, maybe, I think it will take 2 weeks to talk about this prose portion anyway. So we are not really feeling pressured, but in about 2-3 months, we can offer you the entire chapter in new translation. Now today, hold on one moment, please. So last week, when we started this series, I basically did a warm-up, particularly for those of you who are not familiar with the sutra. Then I explained about how I personally ended up discovering Sawaki Roshi's commentary on this Kannon-gyō. And then I just like to start from there today. Now, what I try to do today, and maybe possibly for the next one, is an overview of, to start with, overview of Buddhism, an overview of Lotus Sutra, an overview of positioning of this Kannon-gyō, chapter 25, into the Lotus Sutra. I hope I can complete this within just 2 lectures. But anyway, many of you have been following Okumura Roshi's study intensive. Okumura Roshi, before retirement, used to offer Genzo-e in every May and November. And then after retirement, the concept is a little changed so that it's not too tasking to Okumura Roshi, who really needs to focus on his writing now after retirement. Instead of really full days of sittings and lectures for 5 days, he decided to utilize the same period of time, May and November, into 1 lecture a day, stretched into 10 days. If you are not familiar with this, please pay attention to this. This is a fascinating study intensive series. And I believe the next one in November, he's going to expound Dogen's Shobo Genzo Kesakudoku, which will be really interesting. I am familiar with Okumura Roshi's Genzo-e on Kesakudoku. Kesakudoku means merit of Kesa. Kashiya is this garment we wear. And then he actually did that earlier on, shortly after Millennium in San Francisco City Center. But this time, I think he's redoing the whole translation and re-examining the entire text, so which will be much more interesting, much more deeper, I think. So particularly for those of you who are wearing kesa, I think this will be a really good one. But anyway, in May, when he was talking about Ejo's Komyozo Zanmai, I wonder if you remember, he was talking about Ejo, and he was talking about the discoverer of Dogen's teaching in Edo period, whose name is Menzan Zuiho Zenji. And the Menzan also is quite important person in our school, who really recovered Dogen's teaching into contemporary time of ours. And then he mentioned something about Menzan's way of explaining was so in detail, and then also, very kind, and he explains fully. So therefore, Menzan had a nickname called Menzan Baba. Now, some of you are studying contemporary Japanese, and in contemporary Japanese, Baba is a derogatory word, so please don't use that. Baba currently meaning old woman, but in a bad way, like in English, it's hag, right? So you shouldn't be using that. But actually, this is originally from a Buddhist concept of 3 minds. Okumura Roshi founded this organization called Sanshin Zen Community. This Sanshin is the word. Now, three minds. Now, if you are somebody who's been studying Dogen a little while, you probably do know Tenzo Kyokun. In Tenzo Kyokun, let me show you something on the shared screen. Okay. Going to make it a little larger so it's clear on the screen. So Sanshin, this is San and this is Shin. Sanshin. Sanshin simply means 3 mind. And if you do have Okumura Roshi's translation of Eihei Shingi, this book, it is in Tenzo Kyokun, page 47. Dogen is describing as a practitioner, cultivation of these 3 minds is very important. And those 3 minds are Kishin and Roshin and Daishin. And Kishin means joyful mind. Roshin is the word. Roshin, as it is meaning, this is elderly mind. Elderly mind in Kumano's translation is translated as a nurturing mind. What it means is Roshin also is a synonym of Robashin. Roba is old woman. Old woman means grandmother. In another word, if you become older and then you are staying away from any kind of, loss and gain anymore, you are so secure in your mind and you feel for everybody. So therefore, grandmother tends to be so kind without having any kind of sense of, if I do this, do I gain anything? There's no calculation. There's no bargaining. So that's called Robashin. And Robashin's synonym of Roshin. And by the way, the third one is Daishin, and this is the name of the temple where Moksho-san and Francois resides. Daishin is magnanimous mind. Magnanimous mind is without divisiveness. You can kind of embrace everything. So this really is a very interesting word. So anyway, that's why Menzan was called Menzan Baba. But when I heard that story, I really thought, well, yeah, Menzan Baba, but also our teacher Okumura Roshi is Okumura Baba as well. Okumura Roshi's explanation is so in detail. You ask something, and he just doesn't give you like, kind of answer. But he starts to explain from the scratch. And then, he just builds the logic and then explain fully so that you can really understand fully. And then, I initially, when I met Okumura Roshi, it was his style. But then soon after that, I really started to realize, actually, that's what he was taught to do by Uchiyama Roshi, and Uchiyama Roshi was also taught to do by Sawaki Roshi. And then, of course, this is Dogen's style. If you're familiar with Dogen's writing is very repetitious. Despite the fact you are kind of overblown by his, description. But once you start to understand what he's talking about in his fascicles, he sets up the theme. And usually his way of writing is the opening is the conclusion. And then he starts to put out this and put out this and put out this, and starts to explain this and this and this, step by step by step, in a completely full way. So in another word, we are in Baba tradition. We are in the old ladies lineage. So I also try to do this. Sometimes I meet some new practitioners, and then some new practitioners are familiar with, the type of the question and answer. The other side of Zen people are not into that kind of thing. And you say blah, and someone says blah, and you're supposed to understand it. But we don't function that way. And also, young generation of the people are so accustomed to ask a question to AI on computer. So you just need a quick answer, like one word, one sentence answer, and you think, oh, I got it. So therefore, they get so annoyed when I start to explain one by one. It's like, that's enough, that's too much. But then Dogen's instruction, of course, as you probably read this over and over and over in Zuimonki, if you are in the position to explain something, you really have to explain fully so that you make sure the person who asked the question did understand you. So interestingly, not only this first commentary I received from Okumura Roshi, I showed it to you yesterday, all of the commentaries of Sawaki Roshi is that way. And of course, it starts with explanation of what exactly we are talking about. In other words, what is Buddhism? It's very interesting to me that Well, you know, I practice and study both in Japanese and English in America. So it's not just the American situation or Japanese situation, but in many cases, when you go to somewhere else, when somebody is talking under the context of Dharma talk is the word we use, Howa, uh, I really don't understand if they are talking about the Buddhism or something else. And also, they're using some kind of words, and then it doesn't seem like audience really is on the consensus to understand those words they are using, particularly Buddhism. So, interesting thing I learned from 25 years ago from Okumura Roshi is that we have to start from what exactly we are talking about so that we will be on the same page and then we can continue the discussion deeper and wider. So what is Buddhism? So Sawaki Roshi and Uchiyama Roshi in each series has a very interesting way to explain Buddhism. So there's a very different way of explaining it. But I'm going to follow what Sawaki Roshi does for this particular Kannon-gyō commentary series, which was actually done in 1943 in Osaka. That's recorded and written down here. So he actually even starts from the word religion to start with, which I really started to incorporate in my way of talking. And then every time I'm invited to speak in front of a group of people, despite the fact it is only 30 minutes or 45 minutes talk or a 3 series or 6 month series, I always start from there. And then, of course, depending on the context and depending on the material we are studying, we can slightly change the course, but I think this particular one Sawaki Roshi is doing here is very good for us to keep reading Kannon-gyō. So this is how Sawaki Roshi explains. And then I'm going to open the shared screen again. So now there's a word called religion. And that's not the word we use in Japanese, in Japan. In historic context, Japanese culture never really responded to Christianity. And even now, in the national census, you know, there's a very interesting situation going on in Japan now. According to some surveys United Nations did, over 90% of the people in Japan, if you ask them, are you religious? They would say no. And then if they rephrase the question into, do you think in your belief system Buddhism is the basis? And then over 90% of the people say yes, which means we actually don't think Buddhism is a religion. So in another word, when we use the word religion, we think it's some kind of a belief system. There's a creator, and this creator is permanent and eternal, and it's just only one person who created us and created me, created this world. Or it can be multiple numbers of the beings, but there's a creator outside us. So that's the impression we get. So therefore we say, no, we are not religious. But at the same time we say, but I think I'm Buddhism. Or in my case, I'm definitely saying I'm a Buddhist, right? So the word we use replacing for religion is this word shūkyō. It's a very interesting word. And also it's kind of confusing for like, what's the name of the generation who are currently young? Like Generation Z?
I've lost track.
Anyway, we lost track too. Anyway, the current generation. what I'm saying. Anyway, current generation in Japanese are also a little confused with this word because it's kind of starting to mingle with the katakana in religion. So, but originally, shūkyō means shu is principle, kyo is teaching. So, in other words, it's the type of the teaching you can principally rely on. So it doesn't have to be Buddhism. It can be like I don't know, Taoism or Confucius thought. There's some kind of a reliable sets of teaching you can rely on when you go through this very challengeful of life. So that's called shūkyō. And then Sawaki Roshi defines it that way. And then because Bukkyo is same manner, so this principal teaching, in our case, we are actually listening from Buddha. So therefore, Bukkyo is the word often translated as Buddhism, is Buddha's teaching, and then we take this as a principle, particularly at the time of a challenge of our life. That's our sense of Bukkyo, Buddhism. So I just wanted to put this on the table so that we are all on the same page, because when I keep talking about this as religion or Buddhism, there's a little bit of a discrepancy in understanding what we are talking about. So therefore, Buddha taught the sets of teachings, and we are relying on this. And what is that? And then here, very important thing starts to happen in comparison to, this is why Sawaki Roshi probably always starts with this explanation of shūkyō vis-a-vis religion. The major departing portion or difference between Buddha's teaching, Bukkyo, Buddhism, vis-a-vis other religion, other belief system or spiritual practice system, systemized religious spiritual practice, is that most of the time we start from the time we are in pain or we are suffering. I actually hope that's the entry. Dogen also says it is very important to start to arise bodhicitta. But the bodhicitta arises when you actually see so clearly impermanence in your life. In another word, it's the time of death, loved one's death, losing something, or something we felt permanently here and relying on somehow disappears. And those are the moments usually we feel moment of suffering and moment of the sadness, moment of tragedy. You know, just like I was telling you about the tsunami and earthquake the other day. And at that time, what happens to us is we are very weak, you know. Human beings are really weak. So therefore, we need something to help us. And then most of the time, we say, well, there's somebody who's so sacred out there. So therefore, we can actually go there and ask for some advice or support or counseling. Or someone would say, well, these wonderful gods and deities, you can pray to it. Or there's the God, there's a savior, there's a messiah you should rely on. But instead, what Gautama Buddha did was, instead of asking something outside, his fundamental question was, wait a minute. Yes, I say I am in pain, I am suffering. But then what is this thing I'm calling as I? So if the direction is, instead of going out, it goes in. So that's the most fundamental, very, very important difference between Buddha's teaching vis-a-vis other teaching. And it's quite unique. And then Gautama Buddha's suggestion for this introspection or observation is this silent meditation. And then through this silent meditation, you really start to, I think this is a gross generalization, but I think I should say this just in case. What happens is we really start to recognize the thing I called I, and I thought it was a static thing, is actually constantly changing. Not only physically, but also mentally, even our thoughts are completely changing. And it is also composed by not just by me, but all of those elements. It is composed with educations and social background and people you had contact with, your parents and grandparents, your culture, your language, entirely. And also your mood keeps on changing depending on the weather, humidity, food you ate yesterday, even the distance between Earth and the Moon and Earth and the Sun, etc., etc. It's everything is constantly changing, constantly interrelated. So you really start to see not as me as a static little me, but it's a completely connected me. This whole process is also explained by Dogen by studying Buddha Way is studying the self. Studying the self is to forget the self. And by doing so, you are basically embraced by entire universe. That's the famous line from Genjo Kohan. But this is a rephrasal of all of the other teachings in our ancestral line, starting from Gautama Buddha. Gautama Buddha tried to describe this in the way that hits very well to the people who are contemporary in his society at that time. And the people who also maintained all this teaching kept on doing so throughout. So there are lots of different type of expression, including this Kannon-gyō. So Kannon-gyō is also yet another description of, I would call, how this is made. So in another word, what it is, and in this what it is, how I am existing. So, and also, if I understand what this is and how I am existing in this, I almost spontaneously would understand how I should be in this trajectory. So that is called Buddho and Buddha. Buddho is Buddhadharma. Translation of Buddhadharma. Maybe I should write this. And Buddha is Buddha Way. So in another word, what it is and how to be. This Dharma portion, when Buddha's teaching came to China, Chinese translator did a wonderful thing. They placed this word. It is pronounced either ho, or in our Japanese indigenous pronunciation, it can be translated as nori, but it means, in a secular language, it means law. But in another word, this is unfixated, unchangeable principle, how the things are working. In another word, it is as long as you are living on the surface of this planet called Earth, sun rises from the east, and then sun goes down in the west. Something like that. So it is something just naturally so. So therefore, they use the word law into this. But this is the type of the Dharma, what it isness, teaching of what it isness, from Buddha. So therefore, we learned this from the Buddha, so we use the word Buddha Dharma. And then we also use the word how to be, that's the way, what way we should be in this Dharma. We learned it from Buddha. So therefore we call it as a Buddha way, but it doesn't have to be so. And that's also a very interesting point. If you learn the same thing from, let's say, Jesus, it will be Jesus' Dharma and Jesus' way. And if you learn it from whoever it is, it can be something Dharma, something way. So it's something that doesn't really change by time and place, and it's just how things are. But this how things are taught by Buddha is a little difficult for us to understand because it is so different from how we were brought up to believe in. So that's the portion we really have to constantly have to, experiment and experience and keep on trying by sitting, studying, and living by incorporating those things we learned from sitting and studying into our actual daily life. So interesting thing I keep finding is that from October this season, for Mondays, we selected this Sūtra from Pali Canon, Mahaparinibbana Sutta, and then this depicts almost in detail Gautama Buddha's last days, and then it's almost like a diary, in another word. So it goes. So one day Gautama Buddha decided to go to the travel, and then he goes to such and such village, and he decides to stay there, and then there he taught this and this and that. And then he moves to the next village, and then he taught this and this and that. And he moves to the next village, and he taught this and this and that. And each places he's teaching basically same thing. Three things, which is samadhi, prajna, and sila. In another word, in our way, Buddhadharma, Buddha Way, and then shikantaza. So samadhi is shikantaza, and because samadhi is sitting, meditation. So he's teaching how to meditate. In another word, shikantaza. And then prajna, meaning it is the specific type of wisdom you grow and you nourish to see the impermanent nature or emptiness nature of the things. And how we do that? We do that from studying, our ancestral teachings, Buddha's teaching. And then sila is basically translated as a precept lately. But in another word, that means how do you actually manifest the sila, meaning it's your own life. So therefore, if you are somebody who's working very hard, I think this sila portion is supposed to be work. So in another word, in Okumura Roshi's practice style, he always divides the time into sesshin and genzoe and precept week. Yes? And then, so this way, he's really following the same way as Gautama Buddha taught. So I think this is very interesting that, we keep following what Gautama Buddha kept on doing. So in that, Gautama Buddha keeps teaching Buddhadharma and Buddha Way. And then there are a whole bunch of way of explaining this Buddhadharma and the Buddha Way. And then one of the, and of course many of those way of teaching have disappeared because, we like to teach Buddhadharma, Buddha Way in the way it's so, how do you say, appropriately able to be taken in by the specific time and specific place. So therefore, you do need to utilize some sort of references which is so well understood over the time, over the place. So for instance, if I use the some kind of examples of, let's say, something from YouTube or something from Netflix, and if I use the word in Netflix Wednesday, new season of Wednesdays, have you seen that? And in that such and such, that doesn't travel outside of New York City, United States of America, and then to the places where there's no connection to Netflix, and also in the next century who really don't remember what Wednesday means, etc., etc. So in other words, many of those wonderful teachings probably must have died out, but there some of those are still quite legitimate and quite strong and quite like strongly comes to your mind and heart, so like arrow. And then, for instance, something like impermanence. The word itself is so like come to you, right? And also, shiki sokuze kuku sokuze shiki. At the beginning, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Sounds like kind of like a riddle, but when you start to unwrap that, you really feel whoa, and then you really start to adapt this teaching into almost everything you see. And then Indra's net, this is from Avatamsaka Sūtra, it really gives you almost like a illustrious image of what you really conceptually understood. This is so strong. And this is probably the reason why this Lotus Sutra is still quite cherished and read by so many people and studied by so many people. So I think, and also I just wanted to add one more thing about this portion. As I mentioned, this whole notation of Kannon-gyō was based on 1943 lecture series by Sawaki Roshi when Sawaki Roshi was invited by some Buddhist organization in Osaka. Now, around that time, there was an international Buddhist conference took place in Tokyo, and then he was a part of it, I think. And then this was a conference among all these organizations from Mahayana Buddhism and also Southern Buddhism. And then they really came to like consensus of, yes, the way we teach and way we manifest a little different, but there's all these points are really strongly shared. And then I think Sawaki Roshi actually talks about this kind of in depth in this commentary. And the reason is this connecting point is quite interesting to keep on, for us to keep on reading and understand this Kannon-gyō. So I'm going to just very briefly point out. Number one, it is the type of the teaching that does not have to acknowledge creators. So it is non-creator spiritual path. But in another word, this means the world was not created by someone up there, but this world, and of course this is depend on the definition of the world. This world I live was created by me. So in another word, it is really talking about this sense of expansion of our perception. First, we enter into Buddha Way, Buddhadharma, thinking I am entering into Buddhadharma. But then as you are maturing in your practice and your understanding, you really start to understand this is a very interesting trajectory of one out of all me, living as and in all out of all me. So there's this not one, not two trajectories going on. So that's number one point. And so, by speaking about only just a bullet point number one, some of you have already had this little sense of, now I can read Kannon-gyō. I do understand what the Kannon-gyō is talking about. And then number two, it is about equality. I was telling somebody about, oh, maybe it was in Mondo, that currently Soto Zen School of Japan has a three pillar of mission statement. I don't know if you are familiar with that, but we do have a mission statement. And then those three, number one is equality of equality. So in another word, people can read this as human rights equality. And number two is environmental concern. So we do recognize there's lots of disaster happening, particularly increasing numbers of the things. And then we really offer our support to the areas that's struck by those, strange climates. And number three, and of course, this is also including ecological concerns. As you know, Buddhism is very ecological in another way, to start with. I remember in real time when Jimmy Carter became a president of the United States. That was a good old days. And he was the only American person, the smaller, the better in, how we live. And then he was actually starting to connect with how Buddhist way of living is probably more preferable for the future of a human being, etc., etc. Number three is peacemaking, world peace. But the thing is, it is not about we set up some kind of goal or ideal out there and we work toward it. It is really more about organic concern. Something is happening right in front of you, then you have to do something because this is the world you created. And this is a part, you are part of it, and they are part of you. So based on the understanding of this really maturing, expanded perception, it organically happens, this equality. So it is not really talking about creating the equality in a corporate, like so, the first freshman can speak just like a corporate owner. It's not like that, but it is really more about the organic way of recognizing we are all equally related and each one of us are equally 100% receiving the benefits of the whole universe. That is actually really true, including my back pain is also supported by entire of my life story, entirety of my lineage story, which means supported by culture, supported by environment. It is a consequence of that. It's equally all as a manifestation of entirety. In that way, it is equalism. So that's two. And then number three, compassion. But of course, this compassion is again related to number one and two. It is not about, I'm a compassionate person, so therefore I'm going to look for trouble and I go there. It's not like that. But it is just about something like, when your right arm is injured, your left arm almost automatically lights up and covers it. Yes. So in that way, it is compassion. Number four, it is not about imagination. It is very realistic. In another word, I do it. So this is, originally it shows up in Pali Canon. In Gautama Buddha's a very well-known story. When Gautama Buddha started to teach and his reputation starts to spread, and many people are still misunderstanding what he's doing, and they feel he's a sacred man to revere and bow to him, and then when I get merits, just like I have two elder sisters who always mock me when I gain weight. And then, I have a little bit of a pot belly, And then when I go see my sisters, my sister comes to me, let me rub your rub your stomach and get some merits. This is a Hote tradition, yeah. But anyway, it's not like that. Instead, what happened was this man thought he's going to go see Gautama Buddha and bow to him and receive merits. And then he had an opportunity to meet Gautama Buddha. And then he says, I have heard so much good reputation about you. So I was really looking forward to meet you and come near you. Maybe he wanted to touch Gautama Buddha. But then Gautama Buddha says, no, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way at all. What I did was, I was walking through a jungle in the forest, and I saw some sort of this is in Japanese called kemonomichi. It's a beast path. I don't know if there's such a word in English or French, but when you go into the forest, there's a particular path that's been kind of stepped on by many animals, because many of those animals do know how to move around and which way is actually easier to walk. So after years and decades and centuries, there's a little path, created. Michelle has lived in the forest for a long time, so she's like, yeah, I do know that. But anyway, Gautama Buddha says, I found something like that. And then I just go in and going into the forest, and suddenly there's a clearing. And in this immense castle, wonderful, beautiful castle. Just like that, I found the treasure of this teaching. But you yourself have to go through this jungle path, and you yourself to discover this, and you yourself have to prove this actually leads you to the treasure. So, Sawaki Roshi, known to be someone very straightforward, says, we can't even share fart. Sometimes you really want to ask somebody, like, can you fart for me? But you can't do that. That's the nature of our, practice. You have to do it. Many years ago, I was still quite freshly new into hospice chaplaincy, and I met somebody who was quite sick by then and bedbound and chair-bound. And he mentioned something about he really want to atone what he has done in his lifetime. And then he really have heard about this 100 bells and 100 bows to the Buddha. Honestly, I never really have heard about that 108 bows thing, but as an atonement. So he said, but I can't bow 108 times at this point anymore. Can you do this for me? At that time, I was so gung-ho in this practice, and then I almost thought about, should I do it? And then I have a habit to, no matter how busy you are, I try to spend at least 15 minutes to 30 minutes to read Buddhist text. And then I coincidentally went into this, Kannon-gyō. And then I thought, how ridiculous am I? I can't do his bows for him. But instead of doing 180 bows, he can do something else for atonement, And but anyway, we tend to forget from time to time, particularly when we separate ourselves from Buddhadharma. But anyway, that's another thing. We do it. This is our practice. Each one of us do it. So it's not like you come to me and I give you some answer and you are perfectly fine forever kind of thing. You have to do this. And then last one is you really have to, this is also jikaku shugi. In another word, you really have to, verify this by yourself. You can't ask the Sūtra to verify you. In another word, you have to, many people say, oh, the translation is wrong. This is not appropriate text for me. If I find some appropriate text, I will be enlightened. Doesn't work that way. You have to practice and you have to verify. So this is, in another word, it's a self-awarenessism, so to speak. So I think this is a very good guideline to read Kannon-gyō, because Kannon-gyō, for centuries, for millions of people, been misunderstood by something like, oh, I'm in trouble, so I'm going to ask for this beautiful young lady, and she shows up in front of me, and she's going to do it for me. As a matter of fact, Kannon-gyō is saying completely different things. It is really about your practice, what's happening within you. So I think Sawaki Roshi, by capturing the essence of this International Buddhist Conference, really capturized the essence of what we can learn from Kannon-gyō. So I thought this was a really good introduction. So anyways, let me move on. So next thing we really like to do is, you just read the chapter 25 of Lotus Sutra, but I'd like to talk about the overview of Lotus Sutra itself to start with. So what is Lotus Sutra? Yes, I think I will run out of time in the middle of the explanation, so it will continue to the next lecture, but I'd like to start talking about this. To start with, for the American audience, I don't know the situation in other languages such as French and German, but in the English-speaking world, there are currently 3 widely read translation versions, 3 different versions. All of those 3 are translation of this version from Japanese version. This is from Iwanami Shoten Publishing Company. This is the one I'm also have been using ever since I got interested in Lotus Sutra. It's wonderful because it's a pocket size and you can carry it anywhere, particularly for someone like me who's traveling all the time. This is really handy. Now, also, I just like you to know to re-study what the Sawaki Roshi commented. You will immediately start to recognize this, but to read Mahayana text, you do need some level of understanding of Pali Canon, because Mahayana Sutra is utilizing the same concept of Pali Canon. And then very often, Sawaki Roshi explains this word actually originates in Sanskrit word or Pali word such and such. And if you do understand the original concept of this word, you do understand what this symbolically is talking about, and which I will follow the same way. So therefore, I spent some time and double-checked Sanskrit version utilizing this book, which came out in 2004, 2005. This is a very interesting book of the Hokkekyo Lotus Sutra. And then this was written, translated by Ueki Masatoshi, Professor Ueki Masatoshi. He's also one of the protege of Nakamura Hajime, the most important 20th century Buddhist academic. And then currently his disciples are basically leading all these as a head of all those organizations, universities and faculties and etc. etc. And this version came out with a detailed Sanskrit, alphabetized Sanskrit, and also Chinese translation and the direct translation for the contemporary Japanese from Sanskrit, and with just like Dogen's book, 2/3 of the book is a notation, footprints. It was pretty difficult for me to find time to read this, but I did. And then I also can tell you, I was so impressed with Sawaki Roshi's accuracy of his knowledge. He spent 9 years in Horyuji's Kangakuin and studied and studied and studied and studied. sleeping only 3 hours or 2 hours each day. And then he has this really solid background of Buddhist academia, which really shows so brilliantly in the commentaries on everything. So I was so therefore what I'm going to tell you, I also double checked. So with this, so in another word, I'm going to basically kind of approving the authenticity of that's so blatantly arrogant to me that I said that, but I really had to do that. I'm a post-war generation in Japan, and then as you know, what we went through, I don't know if Italians and Germans went through the same thing, but we went through this whole generation of doubting the value system, because in just a short matter of 50 years or so, Japanese value system went up and down and moved from his side and this side. One thing that was said, it is good, you have to trust this, you should believe this, changed immediately next day, and it keeps changing, kept on changing. So therefore, it actually started in Komaza University, which is a Soto School's university. It influenced Buddhism too. For centuries we were taught to believe in certain particular portion of the Buddhist teaching should be true. And then instead we started to doubt everything, and we started to actually change our practice system almost entirely. So, I'm under that influence, so I always have this kind of like suspicious mind. Even if this was introduced from Okumura Roshi, even if I know so well the high reputation of Sawaki Roshi, I had to check it. But that's one of the 6 things Sawaki Roshi was talking about Buddhist practice, isn't it? So that's good. So I'm not particularly being blatantly arrogant, but I just wanted to tell you I double checked. So anyway, let's start from the title of this sutra. Title of this sutra, just like many other titles of the sutra, is very interesting. Let me show you again on the shared screen. Original title of this, let me just make it a little larger so it's easier for you to read on the screen. It's a Saddharma Pundarika Sutra. Saddharma Pundarika Sutra, in Chinese translation, as I mentioned, we are using Kumarajiva's translation, is Myo Horenge Kyo. As a word itself, it is Saddharma, Sad, correct, right, Dharma, as we mentioned, it's Dharma. So it's a correct Dharma, correct teaching. Again, Dharma, the meaning of Dharma, I'm sorry, this portion of explanation is a little tedious. And I try very, very hard to make those factual information as entertaining as possible, which is actually important for me too. Because, I have seen many people interested in studying Buddhism, but academically, and I think it's a really bad habit. So when I have to explain those, portion, I try to skip as much as possible unimportant portion, like knowledge portion. And then I try to make it as impressive as possible in the way that you would remember the important portion. But I have to go through this. So please excuse me going through this really boring, tedious portion, okay? Now, Saddharma Pundarika Sutra. Saddha is correct and right. And Dharma, as I mentioned, originally has 3 different ways of looking at this word Dharma. Originally, this Dharma means teaching, and also sets of teachings, And then eventually, what Gautama Buddha taught is what it isness and how to be in this what it isness. Eventually, the Dharma, the meaning of the Dharma is expanded, particularly in Mahayana Buddhism, as what it isness. So therefore, the word Buddha, Buddhadharma, shows up. So in another word, if you read it this way, this is a correct depiction of how this world is made of. And then Pundarika is a lotus, particularly white lotus is Pundarika. And Sutra, as you know, it's vertical threads. The reason of why we call the text in Buddhism as a sutra, there's a little bit of a discrepancy in some resources, but the portion of this is once it was written on the papyrus-like paper, you really have to bind it. And then you bind it as a vertical thread. And also, it is also about the vertical, like in timeline, from one generation to next generation to next generation. It succeeded. So whichever the case is, it's a wonderful symbolic explanation. But in this case, this is the sutra, yeah, the text. And so in Sino-Japanese translation, as I mentioned, there are 6 translations in China, and only 4 remained, and only 2 became influential. And out of that, 1 left off, and then currently, Kumarajiva's portion is the most influential, almost completely like pervading translation, which we as a Japanese received in 500s, 6th century. Now, since then, it is called Myo Horenge Kyo. This is a very interesting word. Myo is usually translated as wondrous, and then Ho is Dharma, Renge is Lotus, Kyo is Sutra. So it's another way of understanding is it's a correct depiction of the world, correct depiction of the Buddhadharma, Buddha Way, like white lotus flower. Why white lotus flower is correct is also very interesting portion. And actually, this is one of the most important portion in Kannon-gyō. So, and then also why it is Myo, wondrous. Now, wondrous is this way. Sorry, I'll make it larger. Please take a look at, I do know many of you are quite familiar with the Japanese language, and you are on the really high level of understanding kanji as well. And particularly those kanji that shows up very often in Buddhist texts, you probably know this very well. And this Myo is one of them. And Myo, in contemporary Japanese, it is strange. But in a Buddhist text, it is more about wondrous. The reason why this kanji was born is, if you take a look at this kanji, it's too, what is the English word? Radical. Onna hen, and then katagawa na shou toいう文字で出てきますね. So there are 2 radicals. It's a combination of 2 different kanji combined as a portion of one kanji. This is woman. This is in current Japanese language, it means a little, but in the original language, it means young. So this means young woman. So I find, just like everyone else, young woman is a little strange. It's very wondrous. You know, sometimes they are like laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing, and you ask, what's so funny? And then they explain to me, and it's nothing funny at all. You know, in Japanese, they say they laugh and laugh and laugh when the pencil turns. When pencil turns, is it funny? But anyway, so now you understand. You will ever remember this kanji. Why wondrous is also interesting portion. So, have you ever really seen lotus flower? Have you? Like, not this water lily. Many people here think water lily is lotus. Lotus is, leaf is like this size, and then many of those leaves are actually, you can place a little baby on top and they float. And then flowers are, smaller one is like this one, and the larger one can be even larger, and it's quite large. And did you know lotus flower, the stem and also leaves are water repellent. So for instance, you can put some like a drop of, not even drop, like a small cup of water on top of large leaf, it holds. So therefore you have to shake it and put the, so another thing about lotus, it really thrives so well, blossoms so well from muddy water. It's quite interesting. It comes from this marsh with like, I don't want to put my feet or hand into it. I don't know, something may comes out and bites me. Kind of marsh is a typical wonderful environment where the lotus comes out. And when it comes out, it has no trace of the muddiness of the water because it repels out from this coating of the stem and the flower. So it leaves. And also, when they blossoms, normally when they create fruits, how does a flower create fruits? It comes down and then it becomes a fruit, right? But the lotus's case, lotus flower is blossoming, and you take a look at the inside, there's this strange thing, flat thing, it's like a UFO thing, as a little dots inside, and that's actually the fruit. So fruits, the core fruits is in the flower that comes out from this muddy water, which is completely white. There's no trace of the mud. So that is correct way of depicting what it is. As you kept on reading Kannon-gyō today, Kannon-gyō tends to compare this world and something about this world. And this connective tissue is kanzen, Avalokiteshvara. When this connective tissue is combined, this muddy world is actually beautiful world. So I think the sutra's title itself is a great indication as you really keep on reading, and then also as you keep maturing to understand, to see what this is from Dharma point of view. So this is very interesting portion. Now, just as a little more, information, so that it will etch into your mind, so you don't forget those boring, static things. This translator, Kumarajiva, is a very famous man. First of all, I think I should really say this before. Lotus Sutra is known to be probably got established into our current form already in AD 1st century to 2nd century, which is quite amazing. Just imagine, I always take a look at those historic number and then bring it into my own environment, which is Japanese history. I don't know, it really makes me appreciate Indian culture. First century, 2nd century, there's no such a thing like Japan. And it is height of a Roman Empire. So therefore, many of your ancestors are still living outside of the wall of European Empire, if you are coming from Europe, or descendants of Europeans. And this was already composed in currently they seems to agree it was composed in Gandhara area. As you know, this is the area where East and West meets because of the Silk Road. But the curious portion, which I found it most curious about all of those reports from all of the academias, is that maybe it was a combination between newly arising group of the people who wants to explain Buddhism in, so to speak, Mahayana way, and the group of the people who left the text from Bengal area, Eastern India area, where Devadatta Buddhism was flourishing. Isn't that interesting? You know, Devadatta is Gautama Buddha's cousin in a so-called proper Paricanon, which we received from closer to BC 1st century. Devadatta is a villain, and then he tries to kill Gautama Buddha, and he tries to basically hijack Gautama Buddha's organization. And then in the end, he atones and he dies kind of miserably. But historically, interesting thing was Devadatta actually did really well. After moving out of Gautama Buddha's organization, and then his teaching started to spread, particularly nourished by eastern side of India. And then to prove that, even Genjo's time, who went to India, and traveled around. He reports, so he's a 600s person, reports Devadatta's group actually, despite of the fact that description in Buddhist text actually thrived. So therefore, this was kind of traveled and combined to put this writing together into creating new way of, expressing Dharma and Dharma, Buddha Way and Buddha, Buppo and Butsudo combined. So it is really true when you take a look at the original Sanskrit version. There's a little bit of I don't know how you describe this, like up and down, like a little bit of dense and up kind of feeling of expression. The feeling of the expression comes from the fact that, remember, Devadatta is very self-promotional and also very implementing, and then very soliciting, right? And then that kind of tone is kind of eased out by Kumarajiva's version, and it's much more fluidly flow as a text. But still, I think there's a little bit of a tone in the original that makes you feel like kind of encouraged in the way that you want to say this to somebody. You know, I always notice when I recite Kannon-gyō in morning, choka, morning service, for some reason or another, that word has power to kind of put me, increase my energy. So eventually my mood kind of changes into more upward. There's a little bit of sense of some kind of a language spirit going on. And then I think it may be the factor, eventually, those new religions I was explaining last week probably got on. And thinking about those new religious groups who places Lotus Sutra as the top sutra, main teaching material, their demeanor is very implementing, self-promotional. It's a bit like the type of energy you get from, Watchtower, who stands on the streets in New York City and starts to say, you have to believe this, otherwise you will go into the hell kind of thing, So I think this is very interesting. But at the same time, it is also true that Kumarajiva is not just a translator. He's a great teacher. Somewhat bumpy original Sanskrit text is really well composed into Chinese in the way it actually deepens in its meaning. And I really wish someday you will be able to read this in Chinese and Japanese. It's so beautiful. So, despite the fact that I come from the generation of the people in Japan who initially had a really bad image of Lotus Sutra, as I started to study Lotus Sutra through this, Sawaki Roshi's commentary, now I find Lotus Sutra is so beautiful, particularly so recitably beautiful. So I think this is a very interesting portion as we go on. I was going to go into a little more about characteristics of Lotus Sutra. And I also want to explain about the Kyoso Hanjaku system in China, why Lotus Sutra became the important principal teaching text in Eastern Asian countries. And then also I wanted to give you the whole structural explanation of how Lotus Sutra is, expounded. That I have to wait until next week. And then, upon all of that, I think it is really easy for each one of us to keep reading Kannon-gyō. In another word, maybe you don't need me after the third lecture. So in that way, I like to give you overview, just in case if you have to either skip some lecture series, etc., etc. As long as you get to hear the first three overviews, you will be somehow able to go on by yourself. Okay, so that's it for the second. Thank you very much.